Cassie, thank you so much for joining us today. You've been a huge inspiration within the carnivore community for so many, and we felt it was absolutely necessary to get you on here to hear more about your story. So to start, can you tell us a little bit about who you are, your background? Who is Cassie Wild?
Yeah, so I'm a mom. I have a 6-year-old son, and I don't show as much of my personal life on social media. And that's just because I'm doing so much personal life in real life where, social media has kind of been my outlet to kind of share things that I don't really connect with people in real life on. And I think that it's hard to find people who connect on some of the levels and, carnivore included. And so that's really why I've kind of started enjoying social media more. But if we kind of take a step back, I've always been interested in nutrition. And even from a young age, I was kind of the weird kid, and our family was kind of the weird ones because my dad is a chiropractor. And so growing up, I was kind of picked on a little bit about being weird, taking supplements. When my parents first built their house and we were young, we didn't have cable. So my friends would come over, and I remember one of my friends said, well, they don't have cable because her dad's a chiropractor. And I said, that has nothing to do with having cable, but just little weird things. I was the only one at school who had to have papers signed for not being vaccinated. And, just all these little things. So throughout my life, I've always just kind of been a little bit of an oddball when it comes to some of that kind of stuff. And now it's being more widely accepted. But I guess, nutritionally throughout my life, I've always done what I thought was best or knew what was best at the time of what my perspective was on life at the time. So, as a kid, I would eat like open faced sandwiches. So people would make fun of me because I would take the top bread off because I thought, it seemed so healthy, or go to Subway and get a sandwich, but only eat the inside of it or something. So, I've always just kind of been kind of goofy and quirky that way with nutrition. And then as far as, working out and things, I started playing hockey and soccer at a young age. So I was extremely active. Always a little bit of a tomboy. I played hockey with the boys up until high school. So there was just myself and usually a couple other girls on the team. So it was just one of those things. I grew up with brothers, and I was always extremely competitive. But yeah, that's kind of my background on the nutrition and fitness aspect.
That's awesome. So definitely carnivore fits in with that kooky and weird oddball that you've been living your whole life.
Yeah.
Clearly. So what prompted you? What life experiences brought you to carnivore?
Yeah. So my boyfriend actually started eating carnivore about a year before I even really started considering it, which was about 6 months ago. So he's been doing it for quite some time, and he started doing it for joint problems, which I think were more CrossFit related. So I don't think it was necessarily as much nutritionally, because he's had a couple surgeries since and whatnot. But he started doing it because he heard people were having success with it for joint issues and inflammation. So I for a while, I'll be honest, I made fun of him, and we'd be at the gym, and all the powerlifting guys are there, and we kind of joke about it and be like, well, Dan's carnivore, he doesn't have any carbs, for this workout, and I would make fun of him, but he did really well, and his lifts were all really good, he's real strong. So I got to a point where about 6 months ago, where I was fighting with skin issues so bad, where I had never really had severe skin issues like this. And it got to the point where I was having like cystic acne along my jaw, and there was just like, it was on my neck, and I'm like, I don't even know like what this is or where it's coming from. And I had been doing everything I thought was right, nutritionally and I guess environmentally as well, eliminating toxins and chemicals. And so just kind of out of a whim, I said, you know what, you're doing carnivore, I'm going to try carnivore and see if it helps with my skin. And at this point too, I hadn't really done any research or looked into anybody who was having success with their skin by eating carnivore. I just kind of said, maybe it's the ultimate elimination diet is kind of the way I went into it, and said, we're going to see what happens. And I did find pretty quickly that when I eliminated the plant foods, my skin cleared up really, really quick. But then it kind of started going back. And so then I was still eating, carnivore, strict carnivore. And it started kind of coming back again. But I realized that I cut out eggs initially as well. And then I started eating them again. So I know that part of it was the eggs, but I also think there were issues with the plant foods that I was eating.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then that's just kind of how I got started with it. And ever since I've just been experimenting with it. I think my biggest concern going in was how is it going to affect my workouts? Because I wanted to still work out. But yeah, I know we'll probably end up touching on that a little bit too.
Oh, for sure.
So are you still having skin issues, or would you say they're pretty much cleared up since you've kind of stuck with carnivore?
Yeah, so I've kind of gone back and forth on the things that I'm eating for the past 6 months. So I really like eggs. I love eggs so much. But every time I reintroduce them, I notice my skin flares up. There was a period too where I was more consistently eating carbs, probably about the 3rd or 4th month in, and my skin was flaring up again. So I don't think it's only eggs. I think there is a combination of things going on there. I really, truly, at this point, realize that I feel the best and my skin is the best when I'm eating mostly ruminant meat. So I really haven't been eating chicken or poultry or anything at all, and just a little bit of seafood. So I know I see pictures of your eggs all the time and the egg yolks, and they're so beautiful. And I'm like, I love eggs so much. I realize that my skin absolutely hates them.
Wow.
See, that's how we are with like pork products. We notice instant inflammation when we eat pork. So we're almost like, okay, I'm feeling pork. I'm just going to accept that there are going to be a few days of inflammation. But yeah.
But I think that's why carnivore is honestly so powerful, because like you said, it is the ultimate elimination diet. So once you get to that point and you add something back in, you notice instantly what actually affects you. And I think that's why you see it healing or so many different problems people are dealing with. Like you didn't even know if it was going to affect your skin, yet you got to that point, you eliminated the problem, and then now you've kind of solved that going forward. Like, oh, what was actually causing these issues? So I think that's so cool that we can do these experiments for ourselves and dial in and learn so much about ourselves. That's incredible.
Yeah, and I love seeing that with you guys too, because I know, even though we go through these cycles of, I know with your ice cream and the experiments that you kind of do with that, it's like, we know it's probably not going to make us feel the best. It's almost like a risk you take, because you're like, I know I have this, this tool, this carnivore tool to go back to. Yeah, and I know within a few days I'll feel good again, and so it's just one of those things too, where it's almost like empowering, where it's like, okay, if I'm going to have a day where I do things that aren't normal right now with ice cream or whatever you choose, and every single time it's like, we're probably not going to feel super great, but it takes a few days and you go back to eating carnivore, which, makes you feel good. And then so I really like it in that sense too. I like using it that way.
I agree entirely. That's how we make this so sustainable, is because we've got that base. We've got carnivore as our base. And then if we stray from it, we know we're going to be okay. And
we can always go home.
Yeah, you can always go home.
I like that.
Yeah. All right. So let's transition a little bit into training. So this is kind of a hypothetical situation. Do you think...
Well, first off, let's hear about your training now.
What is your current training goal?
CrossFit, you said?
So right now, and probably for the past 2 months or so, I've sort of eliminated the CrossFit style workout. Oh. So I still try and lift heavy. So it's kind of hard to compare without explaining previously what I was doing. But at this point right now, I'm really focusing on body weight movements. I do a lot of eccentric and tempo movements, or styled movements. So really, most of it has become very low intensity style of training, but it's still combining, functional movements. There are some heavy lifts in there. Prior I was lifting heavy, which I would consider, maybe above my 75% of my max or something. Yeah. So, or 75 or above, I would consider heavy. So, prior I was doing that maybe 4, sometimes 5 days a week, which I could do when I was eating carbs. I really could. And I would feel fine doing that, being zero carb, I realized, one, that I don't recover as well from the heavy training. And that's something that I'm still playing around with. But at this point, I am lifting heavy usually 2 or 3 days a week. And the rest of it, I do a lot of body weight, and I make it really challenging. It's not, I think sometimes when people think of, body weight, it's kind of boring, but I make it really challenging. And there's always a new challenge, but my body feels really, really good doing that right now.
Do you still do like Metcon stuff?
Nope. So I kind of cut that out about 2 months ago. I ended up doing one this past week because my younger brother came home and he's training for the marshals. So he's like, well, just come and let's run with our weight packs on. We had like weights in these backpacks, and then we did kind of a Metcon style workout, and it was all outdoors. So I said, okay, I can't say no to this.
Yeah.
It sounds awesome. But it took me 3 days to recover from this workout. And then we also hiked, it was a pretty strenuous hike that we did for 3.5 miles that same day. So it was, it was pretty rough, but, otherwise I've been staying away from the Metcon. Yeah.
So do you think that you could continue to lift like higher intensity, higher weight 4 to 5 times a week, like you were doing previously, if you incorporated more carbs? Like, do you think that you could find a structure where you could continue with a carnivore lifestyle and like optimize your carbohydrate intake around those? Do you think you could eventually, or essentially, what's your view on carbs and carnivore? And do you think that they're absolutely necessary for high intense training?
Yeah. So when, even back when I started doing CrossFit about 4 years ago now. So when I started CrossFit, I was kind of going through some other health issues. And at this time, I kind of by default ended up being low carb because I was cutting out a lot of these stressors, along with toxins and all these other things that I was changing about my health. So I've always kind of been doing things for as long as my lifting career have been pretty low carb, with the exception of, sometimes Sundays or whatever, I'd make like healthy sweet potato bars or something that were just probably like, I have no idea how many carbs are in here, but it's probably a lot more than normal. So I've always kind of been low carb. And I like utilizing carbs as a tool, to assist with workouts and high intensity. But I also found that when doing CrossFit and doing the high intensity workouts, I did feel the best and the strongest when I had more carbs. So then, but I mean, that was really intense where I was training 2 times a day. Usually, sometimes up to like 5 hours a day, I'd be in the gym. And that was usually weekends when I had the time to do that. But otherwise, I'd go to the gym on my lunch, and train. And then after work, again, I would train, and it would usually be a couple hours. So I think my phone's going off. I'll just silence that. But I think with carnivore, if I wanted to, and I've kind of tried this, where I do the carb strategically, around the workout to help with the high intensity training.
Yeah.
And I haven't gone back to doing that at this point because I think I put myself into such a stressful position to begin with.
Yeah.
Without utilizing carbs, that my hormones got all thrown off.
Yeah.
So I think in time, again, I will go back to training at a higher intensity and utilizing the carbs to do so. But I've been kind of waiting because it's taken a while for, one, my hormones to kind of rebalance.
Yeah.
And 2, as my family's moving right now, we were kind of under a lot of stress for the past few months. So with that, I didn't want to add that stress of working out on top of that. So cutting out the high intensity training was kind of a combination of, okay, one, I really want to focus on rebalancing my hormones and eliminate the stressors of the high intensity. But also I didn't want to be eating carbohydrates. I guess, part of it was that I'm not like an emotional eater or I never had eating disordered issues. But when I am under stress and, I start eating, I'm thinking, wait, why am I even eating this right now? So for me, just cutting out carbs completely during this move and this stressful time was good.
Yeah.
So, and that was kind of a long way of answering like a super simple question. But I think people who do carnivore and they want to still train at high intensity, I think carbs some carbs. It doesn't have to be a lot. A small amount of carbs can be extremely beneficial, and people can still sustain those workouts.
Yeah, it honestly seems like right now you're prioritizing health. And then once you feel like you get to a point where your health is rebalanced, you will go back to the higher intensity workouts. It's just, I totally agree that trying to do those at the same time would just be a little bit overloading. And honestly, I agree on the carbs. It's hard to talk about in the community because carbs are just viewed with just this horrible mindset. And I don't like that. So I almost feel guilty sometimes talking about how I utilize carbs. And from my experience, I think that like intra-workout carbs are some of the best sources that you can use because you're topping off your muscle glycogen stores like as you're removing carbs from that, right? As with these high intense lifts. But I almost feel like there's such a negative viewpoint that it's hard to talk about, but it's also hard to talk about because it doesn't really apply to that many people who are in the carnivore community. You know what I'm saying? Like carbs are not for everyone, but if you are doing intense lifts, they are a great tool for muscle glycogen replenishment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you guys are kind of in this cool position where you're relating to people who are in a very significant healing phase, from autoimmune conditions and chronic conditions. So it's kind of in that sense, really cool that you can relate to that group of people as well. And then you're kind of relating to the people who are also in the stage of like, okay, but I also want to build muscle and do this and do this, where I think a lot of people are kind of in an either or position. And I think some people's, autoimmune conditions prevent them from, going to the gym or, and in healing, we usually don't want to stress our body too much, and it depends on everyone's condition. But I think there's such a wide variety of why people come to carnivore. Yeah. There's some that are out there who kind of develop that mindset of, okay, every carb is evil because it got me so sick, and I think that's where, it's kind of hard to relate to certain situations if you've never been through it. And I think that's where there's kind of the disconnect on the carbs. I know a lot of people with the keto diet too. There's a lot of people out there like Jordan Joy and Danny Vega and guys who are kind of trying to get the whole concept out there. Like you can still eat carbs and, be in ketosis, and it's energy dependent. And so I really like when people start kind of explaining that, because I think, it gets lost in there. And I think carbs do have a really great place in fitness, and especially in muscle strength building.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I just, like you said, it's hard to talk about with those two different communities because depending on your current goal and priority, whether it's like health healing versus gym performance, the conversation is completely different. And so people really have to identify what is my main goal right now and experiment to see what works for them. It's hard to talk about this and not think that people are just going to do what you're doing. And at a certain point like that, you can't do that. You can't just copy what other people are doing.
Yeah, we've actually found that between both of us. Like Ashley views carbs differently than I do right now because we are in different stages of our healing process.
That's a great point.
Like Ashley clearly reversed her autoimmune conditions, whereas my blood work still shows that I have a little bit of ANA. And therefore I feel this like hesitancy to add carbs back in, even though I know that like in the grand scheme of things, like a little bit of squash isn't why I ended up with an autoimmune condition. It's just like you have this mindset of like what carnivore has done for you, eliminating carbs, going all to nutrient dense foods, what that makes you feel like, and you get kind of scared. So I'm glad we're talking about this too, just in case anybody else has developed this fear and they feel like there's no place for carbs in their diet, when in reality, maybe you just need to look at them a little differently.
Yeah, and I think part of it is I just lost my train of thought, but kind of going along the lines of weight loss. Yeah. And, a lot of people come to carnivore and ketogenic diets for kind of specifically weight loss, and ultimately a lot of other symptoms resolve. Yeah. But I think that too is hard for people to kind of moderate carbs the way that they should be. So I think that's where the fear develops for some people, is that if I have some, I can't only have a little bit, and the little bit that's going to benefit me, I'm going to kind of go crazy and not be able to moderate that. So I think that's where some people just do better staying away altogether, you know, and it also depends on where they're at in their fitness journey and whatnot. But I completely agree with what you guys are saying. It's hard to talk about. At the same time, I don't really care what people think. You know,
Exactly.
if I talk about it, I still at this point, if for some reason, you know, something major happens to my health while I'm eating carnivore, I'm okay being like, holy shit, everybody, you know, I was wrong. This is not perfect. And, you know, this is not what's best for me right now. And I'm okay saying, you know, I'm okay admitting if I was wrong about something, or if, you know, I thought something was really awesome at one point, but now it's not as much. And I don't see that happening with carnivore, just because I know how good I feel when I'm doing it and how much better my health is because of it. But I think that's where people need to be honest, you know, honest with themselves and honest with everybody, because there's others in this space too who I've talked to, and they say, you know, oh, I ate this, and now I feel really guilty. And, you know, I never talk about those things, but you know, it happens to me too. And I'm like, but it's okay to talk. Like, it's weird. It's like, it's just freaking food. Like, if you ate something, who cares that you ate it? Like, just, I think you kind of just, where I've talked with other people too, and we kind of say, you know, being so dogmatic about something is, you know, it's kind of dangerous and it's kind of unproductive in my opinion, because ultimately we're just trying to learn from each other. And if, you know, if there's people who aren't being as honest or whatever the case might be about their position and their situation, like, you know, it's harder to learn from that if somebody's not just saying, hey, yeah, I'm going to eat these carbs and see how I respond, or, you know, they're hiding their, you know, their carb eating. It's just kind of goofy to me. But I guess everyone's perception is a little bit different, and how people are doing things is going to be very different. So
yeah, I remember not too long ago you did open up about an experience you had. I think you had lost your period on carnivore, and your hormones were a little out of whack. And I know so many women are concerned, you know, if they go zero carb, starting up carnivore, what's going to happen to their hormones? Can you talk a little bit about your experience with all this?
Yeah, so when I first started carnivore, I was extremely strict with it. And I've also kind of said on Instagram and stuff too, how I think I was doing it very poorly, to be honest. It was my protein and fat ratios were terrible. So when I first started, I dropped a bunch of weight, which never really happens to me because my weight's all pretty consistent. I mean, even since high school, I've been a very consistent weight. My body composition has changed, but my weight's pretty much the same. And so I was dropping all this weight. And I think a lot of it was water weight and just rebalancing. But I also think that I wasn't eating enough to sustain the workouts I was trying to do. So I think it was just a combination of stressors on my body, and my hormones just got way out of whack. Initially it was fine, but after some time, things just really started going downhill. And my cycle was, I've never, ever had issues with my cycle ever in my entire life. So it was really kind of something that I noticed right away. And I said, okay, I don't really feel, you know, at first I didn't feel bad, right? I just didn't have my cycle. But then it kind of caught up with me where I did start feeling pretty shitty. So I think it was the combination of trying to train at a high intensity and also eating zero carb. So then I started incorporating carbs again, and just the things that my body said it wanted, which I've said before, it was kind of like broccoli and blueberries and just kind of random things that I never really crave. I think I lost you guys.
Oh, we still see you.
You can still see me? Okay,
Yeah.
I can't see you, but that's okay, as long as we can hear each other. Oh, you're coming back on. There you are. So then, so it took a while, but once I reintroduced carbohydrates, after probably, I would say 2 or 3 weeks, I did get my cycle back. So then I was not feeling as good afterwards because I had all these carbs and I wasn't feeling good eating the carbs. So then I knew that was my time to say, okay, I don't really need these carbs or want these carbs whatsoever anymore. And since everything has been pretty normal with my cycle, about 2 months ago, I went back to a really strict carnivore, where before it was more flexible, where I was trying to do the carbs for my workouts. But then I just said, you know, I just feel my absolute best when I'm eating strict carnivore. Part of that, like I said, was when we were going through our move.
Yeah.
So I wanted to minimize the stressors, and since cutting back on high intensity and being strict carnivore, everything's been pretty normal with my cycle. It is a little, like, it's a little off, but it's more normal than it was previously when I first started carnivore. And I do credit a lot of that to eating much higher fat at this point.
That was a question I was going to ask. So if we take a look at like your macro split when you first started carnivore and you were still doing your high intensity lifts, do you have a rough estimate of what your protein to fat ratio was then?
Yeah, so I think, it depended on the day, but I was eating a lot of things like venison, which are very, very lean.
Yeah.
And a lot of lean meat. So like I was getting eye of round, and and grass fed in general is going to be less fatty, right?
Yeah.
So things, depending on the cuts, I was getting more like sirloins and eye of rounds and things that are cheaper because I was eating so much more of it. So I'm like, okay, here's kind of my budget on what I want to spend. But I was buying really lean, lean meats, high quality, but lean, venison, chicken, I was eating all this lean stuff. So I think my protein at that point was probably, I would say I was eating like 50-50 at that point.
So then were you supplementing any extra fat in addition to that?
So at times, but I was kind of doing, at that point I was doing things like ghee,
okay.
Which oh my gosh, if you guys ever bought that Golden Nugget yak ghee.
So good.
Okay, it's good. You can just scoop that stuff out. But I didn't really feel super good eating it.
Yeah.
I mean, the taste wise. So ghee, I was doing ghee. I was saving like my bacon fat, and I was eating like the cooked fat,
rendered.
And and that's where I was saying, okay, I can't eat higher fat because my body doesn't like this at all, and I feel kind of crappy when I do it.
Yeah.
So I think we had connected. We were connecting about eating like raw suet. I think we had a conversation about that, some months back, and
switching to the raw fats from the rendered.
What was that?
Switching from
switching to raw.
Yes, from all that rendered fat. Yeah.
Yeah. So then I know around that time too, I was saying, I think I'm gonna start eating raw suet, and then you guys were like, "Yep, we're doing that too." And then we just kind of all started doing the raw suet and the bone marrow and stuff, and that's pretty much, now I'm getting fattier steaks too.
Yeah.
I haven't eaten chicken or venison or anything lean in a really long time. I'll still eat the sirloins, but overall, I'm just kind of focusing on the fattier meats. Yeah. So now at this point, I'm probably eating like 70-75% fat, I would say.
Yeah, that's about what we are. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with when they first come to carnivore is, how do I get more fats in my diet? Because yes, you can add more bacon, you can add more butter, but at a certain point, like you said, you aren't going to be feeling that good. And if you're not supplementing with those raw sources of fat, which are unfortunately sort of hard to get a hold of unless you have access to a local farmer, it can be really hard to mitigate that. So I'm glad we had this conversation.
Yeah.
That's a frequently asked question we get is, how do I add more fat to my diet? Which is so crucial because like you said, if you're not adding the extra fat, you're not going to feel that good on carnivore. Yeah. And that can be dangerous.
Yep. And I think that was my main issue when I first started. It was just so much protein. And with the high intensity training, I was trying to eat. I mean, there was a point where I was eating probably sometimes 3.5 pounds of muscle meat a day. Oh. And I mean, I'm 5'6" and I weigh 134 pounds. I'm like, that is absurd for somebody to eating 3.5 pounds of meat a day. One, I can't afford that. Two, it's like, okay, my body's not using all of this. It was just, it was ridiculous.
So, okay, along those lines though, I remember you did a period of time where you went super high fat and really lowered your protein. And I think that this is an important discussion to have for people who are athletic, because I was thinking about doing what you did. So you basically shifted your protein way down and you increased your fat a ton to see if that would regulate your hormones. And you noticed, you talk a little bit more about it, but I was hesitant to it because all three of us are like super active in the gym. So talk about that period of time where you lowered your protein and you were still doing your high intensity training.
Yeah, so that was probably the worst of it all. And I think so with that, I was still trying to do, like you said, the high intensity training, but I was trying to rebalance my hormones, which was, I mean, when I look back on things, I'm like, what a freaking idiot. Like, why, it was so clear looking back now, but at the time. So, yeah, so with training, my training was absolute shit, like the worst of the worst when my protein was too low. So I still notice that now too, because there are some days where, I do eat way more fat and not enough protein because now I'm way on the other end of the spectrum. And then my workouts will be terrible. I feel it's like just an absolute exhaustion. Like my muscles are exhausted. Definitely cannot feel like the pump in your muscles whatsoever. And that's when I know too I haven't had enough protein because to even just to, kind of maintain muscle, you need a certain amount of protein.
Yeah.
So where I usually try and stick to about my body weight in grams of protein. And that's usually when I feel about the best. And previous to carnivore, if I would go above that, I would still feel fine. But on carnivore, I find that if I go too far above, I kind of lack the energy that I need from the fat.
Right, because ultimately fat is an energy source and protein is that building block to maintain and build our muscles. So I think the takeaway message here is that people need to experiment and probably avoid super low protein or super low fat. Just either of those are not going to work. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the hardest thing because although my macros at that time previously when I was trying to rebalance my hormones and still train high intensity, at that time I was probably eating, the 70 to 75% fat, but I felt really shitty.
Yeah.
And I think part of that was because my hormones were already thrown off. My body just kind of needed to go through this phase of like, let's just start over kind of thing, for my body because it wasn't happy with the fat. It wasn't happy with the protein. It wasn't happy with the training. So then that's kind of where I just said, I give up. I'm going to listen to my body and just do whatever it tells me at this point. And as goofy as eating a whole pint of blueberries was, I actually during that time felt super great. And then, a week or two after did not feel as good again. So I think sometimes for whatever reason, it just needed that rebalancing. And then I was trying to do more 24-hour fasts and just kind of reset things a little bit, which I didn't know if that was going to throw off my hormones either. But again, we're just experimenting. And, it's just kind of one big experiment. Ultimately, I was just doing what felt best. And now I'm doing the higher fat and I'm training not as high intensity and I'm feeling super good. So at this point, I'm happy with where I'm at, but things can always change.
Yeah, your intuition is really admirable and listening to your body. I think that's something that's kind of hard to do in this day and age when we're all numbers based and we're all trying to do an experiment on ourselves. So I want to segue. The first thing you said when we started talking was that you're a mom. So,
I love that. Yeah. Your first identity.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about being a carnivore mom and what mentality you have on sharing this lifestyle with your son?
Yeah. So it's so funny because my son, he thinks I'm so cool, but I'm in my head, I'm just such a weirdo, where it's but he thinks things are really cool. So the carnivory has not rubbed off on him. It's not, I do struggle to get him to eat meat. And I was a vegetarian for about 10 years. So as a kid, I remember absolutely hating meat and he doesn't really like it all that much, so I do kind of have to force him to eat it at times. And so, but he is interested in what I'm doing and what I'm eating. So he'll always act like he wants to, what is that? And he watches me cut up, raw liver and the suet and just things there. He goes, ew, he thinks it's gross, but cool, but gross, but cool kind of thing. Where it's I don't know what to think. So when we make, beef tongue or something, we always show the kids what it is. And my boyfriend has two kids too my son is 6 and then his are 12 and 14. So they're a little older where they make fun of it. They're oh, what about cow eyeballs? And I'm yeah, we would eat those too.
Yeah, find me some.
Yeah, so we're kind of a joke to the kids in a way, but at the same time, I think there's part of it that they think is kind of cool. So we try and we all have the older kids try like the liver and the heart and the tongue, but we try not to tell them what it was. And at one point, we made a beef liver, and it looked like a chocolate mousse. So we said, oh, here, you want it? Because I like to make healthy desserts too, so I usually make things for the kids, and they really thought it was chocolate ice cream, and they were so disappointed.
Wait, do you mean liver pate?
What? Yeah, what did I say?
No, no. So she made liver and masked it as chocolate pudding.
She made liver pate. Okay. Oh, I see.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I don't know what I said. Maybe I messed that up with the liver mousse. I don't know what I called it on here, but but yeah. So we had the kids try it, and they thought it was chocolate mousse, and they were so disappointed.
No.
So we like the kids to know how we're eating and what we're doing, but we don't force anything. I mean, we don't force anything on them, and I think that's the biggest thing. Is just kind of setting that example. And, saying, it's not the only way to do things, but it's the way we do things. And, this is how we feel best. And we always try and reiterate, when you eat a certain way, like just get in touch with how you feel after you eat that way. And the kids too, I think the older ones are starting to notice, if they eat something that isn't so good for them, they don't feel as good. So I think it's just helping them make those connections when they're young. And hope that in time, not saying I hope they all become only carnivore, but I think I think it's important that they ultimately all realize that different food is going to make you feel a different way, and you want to feel your best. And if eating almost all meat or mostly meat or only meat or whatever is the way you feel your best, like that's okay too, So
yeah, we obviously aren't moms here yet, but it's been in the back of my mind, like, how do you open up this lifestyle to a young child? And I think the way you're doing it is amazing. Just being completely open and honest with what you're doing, and just
encouraging being in tune.
Yeah, and introducing them to these items at a young age is pretty much probably the only thing you can do. And if, like you said, if you don't like meat now, it doesn't mean you're never gonna like meat. Like, you're a perfect example. You were vegetarian. You didn't even like meat when you were younger, and here you are pounding down
3.5 pound steak.
So
not that much anymore. I could not eat that much. I was like 3.5 pounds. Like, I look at now, I'm eating probably about 1.5 pounds of meat, like muscle meat a day. Usually at the most, sometimes 2 if I'm really hungry. But yeah, so it's fun. It's kind of just like I said, the kids think we're kind of weird, and they know it's different than what most people do. Yeah. But they also realize that we really do take care of ourselves, and the whole being a nutritional therapy practitioner too. Like, the kids know that my head is in the right place. I don't think they think I'm totally weird and crazy, but it really is. We always just try to remind them, like, we just want to feel really good long term. So it's just one of those things. You just tell them what you're doing, show them what you're doing, but you don't have to force it on them. And they pick up on little things.
Right. I feel like if you were to force it on them, they would almost just despise it more. I feel like it's
vegan. I'm going to be a vegan.
Yeah. I wonder if one day your son's going to look back and have a story to tell. Like, he opened up his lunch at school, and a kid across from him was like, oh, he doesn't eat crackers because his mom's a carnivore.
Oh. Right? Kind of like when I was a kid, and people would make fun of me and my parents and whatnot. And maybe I don't know, but I don't want kids to pick on him either, or make him like feel uncomfortable about things. So I don't want to be like like that super weird mom. I already kind of am, but it's just it's funny because he did say one day, I want to be a vegetarian, and I just said, no, you aren't. As much as I want to support him, I said, no, you aren't. But you're gonna eat that beef stick, and you're gonna like it.
Yeah, and I think the best thing you could do is just be confident in your way of eating and your lifestyle. And like, if other people pick on a certain thing, like, so long as you're owning it and you're rocking it, like, it doesn't matter, So I think you're just doing
leading by example.
Yeah, it's really inspiring. Yeah.
Yeah, and I like your story. I think you guys had a story. It was like yesterday or today about the fruit that at Ashley. I think it was at Ashley's work or at work or school or whatever it was, and I was just kind of like, those situations are hard because people don't really understand it, and kids are more open and understanding than adults, so that's where I think being a parent isn't like to expose that to the kids isn't as hard as to expose it to your peers and your family, who don't get it.
For people in the carnivore community, it's like, oh, this is all I see on my Instagram. This is so normal. And then you take a step back and you're like, hold on. 99% of the people around me in my work situation have no idea that this is even a way of living. So it really is hard to, I have 2 lab groups, and I did have the conversation with one of them, but it's just, where do you even start? You know, it's so mainstream that it's a hard conversation to have.
Yep, I agree. Where do you even start? Because, and we're, in working with people who have like chronic illnesses and things, so many times I want to talk about carnivore, and I really don't all that much, unless I think it's someone who I know well and is receptive to things. Otherwise, it's almost like putting like our practice and my dad's practice like in this weird light of like, whoa, okay, that's way too woo for me. It's like we already do, like nutrition response testing and things that are kind of different and goofy, and people don't really get it. So then, like on top of it, where I'm telling people like eat 0 vegetables, where most people are still, like salads are awesome, and I'm, all I want to eat is a salad because it's so healthy, and so it's really kind of It's hard.
The ultimate woo-woo, the carnivore chiropractor.
Wow. I think there are a couple people that I've come in contact with, like on Instagram, who are like carnivore and chiropractors. Yeah. And one I think reached out and asked if we promote carnivore in practice, and I said, at this point, no. A lot of it is people who've been patients for like 20-some years, from my dad. And so it's challenging. I think even at family gatherings, you don't want to be that person who makes people question everything they're putting or feel bad about eating, that cookie on Christmas or whatever it is now. And but at the same time, I think you want to feel part of the community, but it's hard. There's still a disconnect, and people, even my mom, and one of my brothers, they're just they make fun of it so much because it's weird and it's different. So
I think like one of the reasons we were so attracted to becoming your friend is that you never push it on anybody. You're just sharing your experience, and that's all you can do. You never ever have this intention to make someone else feel bad about their lifestyle, because you wouldn't want that on the flip side. You know what I mean? So,
yeah, and I think heading into the holiday season, this is going to be our first holiday season as carnivores. Yeah. And I think the only way to approach like family members in terms of having that conversation of like, oh, no, like I'm not going to have a bread roll or like this Brussels sprout or broccoli casserole that you made. Mm-hmm. And just really make it clear that it's not them. It's not what they made for you. It's just, hey, this is what makes me feel best. And this is what I choose to do. And I think being open and honest about it, rather than like the approach that I took the other day, which was just like push it to the side and hide it. It's going to be an easier way to have this. Yeah.
I completely agree with that. And I think it's, over time, I don't think, I shouldn't say, I don't think there's anyone out there. There are people out there who've gone from their standard American diet to carnivore. It's like a very black and white situation, where I think there's a lot of us who've kind of gradually, maybe one year we're like, I'm not going to have that cookie, but I'll eat this dip, or, so it's like, I think some families kind of know like who are the kind of weird quirky eaters in the family. So it is what it is. As kids growing up, there was the ones who wouldn't eat their vegetables, right?
Yeah.
And now it's kind of
we're back to that. We're back to that.
We're back to those adults who won't eat their vegetables. So I mean, most families should accept it, but I know there's people out there who've said, it's really hard because like a significant other or something doesn't approve of their eating and their lifestyle, but everyone just has to kind of figure that out, I think, in their own situation. But
exactly, yeah. And once you figure it out, just own it. Whatever you do, that's your thing. So if you aren't already following Cassie Wild, can you please tell people where they can find you?
Yeah, so I don't really do much on Facebook. I'm on Instagram, so it's Cassie_Wild. And I hang out there. I go in my spurts of like teetering between not really wanting to, to be on my phone or on social media or anything, and just wanting to like live outside and do whatever, to being on there, a decent amount and trying to communicate with people and get connected. So I'm on there on and off, but that's where I'm at.
And to answer people's question, Wild is actually her last name, even though it fits the carnivore lifestyle perfectly.
And her training. Yeah.
Yes. So thank you so much for joining us, Cassie. We'll have to get you on again. We can relate to you so much, and so we love having conversations with you.
Yeah, and I think your experiences are really going to be of value of other people to learn about as they mitigate and kind of learn about carnivore themselves. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. I love talking to you guys.
Thanks, Cassie. Bye-bye.